Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, then an extra special welcome to you. I appreciate you so much for supporting my channel, and I hope that you are having the most amazing day so far. Today's case I know will frustrate so many of you because this is one of those cases where it's very clear what happened, but unfortunately this is listed as an unsolved missing persons case. So without further ado, let's get into the case of Rachel Mellon Skemp. I feel like at some point in this video I'm gonna say Mellencamp, but her name is Rachel Mellon Skemp. And this is because her mom remarried when Rachel was younger. So they added her stepdad's last name into hers to make it Rachel Mellon Skemp instead of just Rachel Skemp. Sometimes you'll also see her name listed as Rachel Marie Mellon. Like I said, Rachel's mom had remarried, so her biological father wasn't regularly in her life, but they still were on good terms with each other. Rachel's mom, Amy, was Asian and her dad was white. So Rachel had this gorgeous complexion, these absolutely stunning hazel eyes, and then a very rich kind of dark brown hair color. And the police actually make a point to say that she looks like she could be of like Greek heritage. She lived with her mom, Amy, and her stepdad, Vince Mellon, in Bowling Green, Illinois at the time of her disappearance. And to talk about her stepdad a little bit, he was kind of a bum. He didn't have a job. He was unemployed a lot of the time. And he also had a temper that he could not control. Amy had 2 kids with Vince, and they stayed together throughout all of the highs and lows of being married as a blended family in Bollingbrook, Illinois. There was an incident when Rachel was 8 years old where Vince and her mom got into a huge altercation, and this resulted in Amy getting a restraining order against Vince, citing the fact that during this altercation, Vince had pushed Amy down the stairs and then he made verbal threats to hurt Rachel. And keep in mind, Rachel was only 8 years old at this time. Despite the turbulence at home, Rachel was described as a very cheery and kind person. She was in 7th grade at Ward Middle School and she was 13, so she started to leave the bubblegum pop of her youth behind and get a lot more into like 90s grunge culture and teenage angst. Her favorite album was Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, and she listened to it almost every day.
Wait, start again.
She was friendly, well-liked, and made good grades. Her friends said that she was that kind of person that could really just bring you up if you were feeling down. But leading up to her disappearance, Rachel's sunny personality seemed to cloud over. A few weeks before she went missing, Rachel had run away to her friend's house, citing that she didn't want to get in trouble for something that her younger siblings broke in the household. She did voluntarily go back home that next morning. She had also cut her dark brown hair into a bob that stopped just like right at her jawline. So this was like a traditional kind of edgy 90s haircut, but at the same time, a sudden change in haircut or hair color can often signal emotional distress. Hence, breakup bangs, cutting your own bangs after your boyfriend dumps you. People often try to change their appearance after they've gone through something major in life. Her friends also saw her crying at her locker just a few weeks before she went missing. They asked her what was wrong, but Rachel didn't want to tell them. Instead, she said that she would just handle it herself. On January 31st, 1996, 13-year-old Rachel stayed home from school, citing a sore throat. At 11 a.m., she called her grandparents to say hi, and her grandmother said that Rachel seemed relatively fine on the phone. However, this call only lasted 5 minutes, and that's when Rachel randomly just went quiet during the phone call, and her grandmother asked, "Is he there?" And Rachel said yes before hanging up. Vince, being the only other person in the household since he didn't have a job, this must have been who they were talking about. And Rachel hung up the phone, and this is really the last time any of her loved ones ever spoke to her. After that, around noon, her stepdad says that he and Rachel played video games in the living room before he decided to take their German Shepherd on a walk. Rachel didn't want to go. She stayed on the couch where she had been laying in her PJs because she was homesick, with a blue blanket over her and 2 pillows under her head. Remember, this is Illinois in January, and it is absolutely frigid outside. So she stayed inside while Vince walked their dog. A lot of people think that Vince is shady for taking the dog out for a walk, but this was a German Shepherd, and those dogs are extremely energetic. I know somebody who had a German Shepherd, and he literally chewed a hole through their door so that he could escape one day. So this is a dog that you have to walk rain or shine. On this walk, apparently, the dog saw a rabbit and slipped his collar and ran away. Vince chased after the dog for about 45 minutes before giving up and going home. He noticed that when he got home, the couch was empty. There was no Rachel and no pillows and no blanket. He assumed that she went to her room. Rachel's younger sister arrived home from school around 3 o'clock, and she noticed that Rachel was not there. Vince said that he didn't know where she was. However, she was not reported missing until Amy arrived home after 5 p.m. She gets home and sees that Rachel is missing and calls the Bollingbrook police. Well, nobody saw Vince, and after the phone call with her grandparents, his word is all we can take for what else happened that day, and none of the neighbors saw him walking the dog. However, a real estate broker who was selling a house in their neighborhood did see the German Shepherd running out by himself, and he returned him to the Mellon Skemp house around 4:30 o'clock in the afternoon. The police show up and examine the scene, and they notice immediately that Rachel's big coat is still there, as well as all of her shoes. Her purse is still there, her backpack is still there, and so is her Walkman. The only thing that seems to be missing are those 2 pillows that she was sleeping on and the blanket that she was using. If Rachel did leave the home that day, she did so in just PJs and house slippers, which is just really hard to believe since it was less than 0 degrees Fahrenheit that day. The police look under her bed, and this is what makes them suspect foul play. They find the book Daddy Kisses, which is a children's book about animal parents and their young. And you might not think that's weird, but next to this book, they found a kitchen knife and Rachel's diary. They open up her diary and they find an entry about how her stepdad would kiss and touch her inappropriately. This to me just makes the case. She's missing, and right before that, she had a knife in her bedroom, which indicates that she was scared for her safety, and she had also written about molestation. There's not much detail about this diary entry online. I really am interested in the details surrounding this particular entry, like what else Vince might have been doing. But basically, all it says online is that under the guise of what she shouldn't be doing with boys her age, Vince had kissed her and then had touched her inappropriately. So unfortunately, that's all we know about the diary entry, but I think that plenty of evidence right now is pointing to Vince not being a good guy. This would explain the change in behavior leading up to her disappearance. People who are hurting can often compartmentalize their abuse, and they may seem happy and they may be doing well in work or school, but at home, things are absolutely terrible.
Carrie, so I want to say happy birthday to Carrie. No. If you want. Happy birthday, Carrie.
And as this change in behavior with her trying to run away, with her crying at her locker, this could all signal that the abuse was worsening, or in the worst case scenario, that Rachel could have fallen pregnant. The police look at Vince and they do notice that he has scratches on his arms, but he says that these were injuries that he sustained while working on his car. Vince had a long record of domestic violence in his current relationship with Amy, his threats towards Rachel, and in past relationships as well. When he was interviewed back in 1996, Vince says,
I didn't really look around the neighborhood as far as thinking, something might be suspicious. So, I don't know what to say other than, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at that point.
There's basically no evidence in this case. Rachel's mom is interrogated for over 8 hours, and Vince is interrogated for less than 2 hours because he keeps pleading the fifth and won't tell the police anything. Rachel's mom defended Vince the entire time in her interview with police, and because there's really no evidence in this case and nobody is pointing the finger at Vince and his immediate family, they really can't do that much. This case unfortunately ran cold as police ran out of leads and tips, and they didn't recover any evidence that day when they first searched the home. They also have no ID for who this potential intruder might have been, if they even exist. In the year 2000, a grand jury met after new interest was sparked in Rachel's case after it was featured in an episode of America's Most Wanted. At this point, Vince had to give blood, semen, and saliva samples to investigators in the event that they ever find evidence. He also took one lie detector test, which he failed. Despite Rachel's diary entry alleging that Vince had sexually molested her, as well as Vince's legal history of being involved in domestic violence, Vince was never charged. Amy maintains his innocence as well from their new residence of Tennessee. Neither of them have done any public interviews since Rachel's initial disappearance. However, Vince has not stayed out of the eyes of the law because in 2017, he got arrested for a DUI. Rachel's biological father, Jeff Skemp, still hopes that one day Rachel's case will see justice. He, along with the police, think that she was the victim of foul play, and Jeff has been very vocal about who he thinks the prime suspect is. Jeff believes that if the police had searched the house harder that first day that they were called, they would have found Rachel's body. He thinks that it was just somewhere in the house, perhaps the garage, and if the police had taken the case more seriously from the beginning, then they probably would have found evidence in the house, if not Rachel's body. He does have one memento of his daughter, and that is her Walkman. When she first was reported missing, Jeff walked into her room and found her Walkman with the Jagged Little Pill album still inside. She had last been listening to the song One Hand in My Pocket. This case makes me so mad because there's really only one person who could have done it. Like, what are the odds that when her stepdad leaves for 45 minutes, somebody walks in, takes Rachel without leaving any signs of a struggle or any evidence? I think her diary entry says it all, and if I saw that as an officer, that would be an immediate red flag to pursue Vince further, and maybe they did at the time that she first went missing, but Amy stands by Vince and they will not tell the police anything about Rachel's disappearance. I think we all know what happened to Rachel, and hopefully one day the police will gather enough evidence to charge Vince with her murder. When someone is just a missing persons case and there's no body, it's really hard to charge them. And hopefully one day the police will gather enough evidence to formally charge Vince with her murder. And until then, the case of Rachel Mellon Skemp is just an unsolved missing persons case. Anyone with information about what might have happened to Rachel is encouraged to reach out to the Bollingbrook Police Department. I will put their phone number in the description box below. Anything will be helpful in this case, whether it's something you heard from a friend, or if you knew Vince after this event happened, maybe you have something that the police need to crack the case. I just find this case so sad and so frustrating because Rachel had barely even begun to start living her life before it was taken away from her. And she really tried to make the best of her time on earth by being a kind person and being such a warm light for her friends. And she absolutely did not deserve what happened to her. Her behavior is very typical of somebody who is experiencing this kind of sexual molestation at home. And I encourage anybody to reach out to their friends if they notice them acting this way, because maybe they just need somebody to ask them what's wrong. Well, that is all the information I have for you guys on the vanishing of Rachel Mellon Skemp. Until next video, I hope you all have a great rest of your day and stay safe.